see this week.
Well, I saw that there were some suggestions that came up because my car was broken into. And the suggestions that came up were to worry about it and to get upset about it. And to be afraid, actually. I don't know about the fear, but I decided that I wasn't going to be upset or worried about it. And all the problems that came about to fixing it and all of that just got resolved. X took care of that. So actually, you know, I didn't see the suggestions especially because it went by so fast. I just decided I wasn't going to do that. So I just didn't stop it to see the suggestions particularly.
Right. And what was the consequence of that, which we discussed on the phone? I mean, let's serve the whole thing, not just part of it.
That's right. The consequences were that I took it very casually, didn't really see or appreciate the action of X in the life.
Well, it was even more dramatic than that, wasn't it? A false conclusion was arrived at. What did you say over and over and over again as you were describing that experience? I was just too... You don't even remember now, do you?
No.
Repeatedly, you said I was just too tired to deal with it. That was what you said over and over and over again. So a conclusion was made. And all of it came about because the awareness was too tired to deal with suggestions. And so it didn't. So they weren't seen clearly, and a new conclusion was formed. What conclusion was that based on? Which knowledge decision is that based on? I'm too tired to deal with this.
Complaint?
No.
Irresponsibility.
Not a decision. Which of the 6 decisions was that making again?
Authorities. Somebody else will take care of it.
Nope. They have been in there. Isn't that 1 and 2? I have rights. I have the right to be tired. I have the right to not get disturbed by these terrible events. And that's what brought about that wonderful experience. Because I have rights. Isn't that correct? Isn't that exactly what happened? So 1 came up and said, I'm tired. This is really disturbing. And I don't want to deal with it. And 2 said, that's all right. You have the right to tell the policeman to fuck off when they ask you to do something. You have the right not to go into work even though they need you desperately, or at least think they do. You have the right to sit here all day long and do nothing. And there was some work going on at the same time, some real work of observation. But the awareness was tired and it didn't do it well or clearly. So what happened? A really wonderful thing happened, which was that you chose not to resist the disturbance. And at the same time, you remade decision number 2, which is, I have the right to do nothing if I choose to. And then the conclusion started getting made that that's what brought about this experience, was sticking up for my rights. And so a lot of stuff was missed about what was going on, isn't that right?
Yes, that's right.
So I'd like to ask you a question.
Mm-hmm.
Can I afford not to look at the suggestions?
Mm-mm. No.
See? It sounds good. It sounds really good, doesn't it? Just sort of be a little bit aware. Don't bother to look at the individual suggestions as they come up. But what if one real sneaky one gets by and colors the whole event? So then the environment that's being reported to X is completely inaccurate, isn't it? It's about sticking up for rights rather than not resisting second force. And X balances to that. But it's not true. So there was a false feeling of elation that was based on not seeing things as they were.
Right. Right. And after that, the following day, I had what I would describe as massive non-eye attacks. So severe that I was too upset to even try and sort out what the suggestions
You are now
were.
out of balance. You described an environment that wasn't even there. You're completely out of balance with what is.
Mm-hmm.
You were living in an artificial world where you had rights. And very quickly you found out you didn't have the right you thought you had. That the eyes came back very strongly and said, you don't have the right to ignore us. I'm sorry.
That's right.
Because that was not an accurate description of the environment that you're living in. Okay.
Yeah.
So I don't know that I can ever afford to not pay attention. When you look at the whole thing, the next day,
Yeah.
what could have happened many days after that had something not stepped in and said, wait a minute, where are you going?
Yeah. That's right.
That was what was asked of folks to do, to say, what are the suggestions, what is the environment that they're reporting, which of the 4 DBUs are they trying to deal with, and start to get an understanding of what the self is doing, this personality. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Any other observations about the experiments for this week? Nothing?
I had a lot of turmoil concerning that it was that I did, that I went out and I enabled myself to get things that I want, and it doesn't have anything to do with anyone else, or like thinking about it's coincidence. I constantly doubt, is arising.
Got what? I doubt.
I kept thinking, what if one of those suggestions is my true self? And I'm sitting here and judging all of those suggestions as not I, but perhaps one of them is truly I.
Okay, what if? It's one thing to think it, why don't you carry it all the way through? What if? What would be the consequence of that?
Well, I would come in front of it with a suggestion that undermined it and negated it. And I would just continue
So,
along.
if I say, what if this tangerine is not a tangerine? Then one day it will turn into a rock. Because I doubted it and thought it was really a tangerine. It really wasn't a tangerine. So it'll actually turn into the rock that I thought it always was. Is that what you're saying?
Could be. I'm not quite following.
Really? If I look at this tangerine and I decide that it's a rock, isn't that kind of an analogy for what you're saying?
Yeah.
That you're taking the real I and saying, well, what if I call the real I something that's not really real? So what if I look at this tangerine and I say this tangerine is a rock?
No, it's still a tangerine.
It's still going to be a tangerine, isn't it? So what possible harm could it cause? Except that one day you might find out you were wrong and there was something in there that was real. Now, you're telling me that the way that you're going about living now is going to get you to eventually one day find out what's real?
That's the way I'm going about living.
What?
Is I am searching for what's real.
I know. That's what I'm saying. Is that working real good? Have you found anything that you could call real so far? So maybe this method will work better. Maybe if by calling everything unreal, I might discover one day I'm wrong about one thing. So far, looking for the real hasn't worked too good, has it? So maybe a method that says I'll decide everything is not real and then be proven wrong by one thing that will just insist on being real, no matter how unreal I call it, maybe that will work. So this little effort that we use is real strange in that sense. Oh, I'm sorry. Want this?
Yeah, it's great.
Because it seems not to be direct. Okay? We're used to using what we consider to be a direct method. If I want to know what's real, then I go and look for what's real. I ignore the fact that I have so many beliefs and opinions and illusions that I wouldn't know that it was something real if it bit me in the face, okay? It's like that old sight gag about somebody looking for their glasses and they put them up on top of their head, okay? And they're looking everywhere for their glasses, right? And they're walking around with them in a place where they never see them, but they're using sight to find them. You see? So this method may seem to be really bizarre based on what we already believe should work. If you want to know what's real, you go look for what's real. The only problem is you'd never recognize it if you ran into it. Because what you see everywhere you look is your own illusions about what is. You don't see the thing that's actually there. You see your own beliefs and your own opinions. Okay, that's what we've been talking about, is understanding that each of these decisions creates a picture of the world that we live in. And it's not true. That's what the experiment is about, that says, write down the picture of the world or the environment that is being described by this I, this not I, and see that it's not true. Then how can I ever find anything that's real if I'm living in an illusion all the time? If all I can see is my own illusions projected out onto the world, you see. So we use a method that actually works, but sounds very strange. Decide that nothing is real. And then one of these days, something that's actually real is going to just keep sitting there being real in front of your face all the time. You have no choice but to recognize it. You see what I'm saying? It's bizarre, but it'll work. Hello.
Came in contact with,
What's that?
everyone around me was like reacting like, hey, I'm real.
Well, of course. You know what kind of anguish it causes to think that maybe you're not real. Do you really think that most people are going to be willing to sit in that anguish? No. The people who are willing to sit in that anguish show up here. Or somewhere like this, you understand? The ones that are not willing to sit in that anguish so they'll one day find something that's real live out there and never even know this. More power to them. God bless them. Who cares? I care about the ones who aren't willing to hide from that anguish and want to know what is real. Okay? And if you want to do that, I can tell you how to do it. And it's the oddest damn thing you'll ever think of. Which is why people need to come to someone outside to tell them how to do it. They'll never figure that out. Don't look for what's real. Just declare everything to be a lie. And something is not going to be a lie, so it's going to refuse to be declared a lie. Okay? No matter how much you try to see it as an illusion, it's going to keep sitting there being real. And then you're going to know it's real, huh? You'll be one of the few people on planet Earth who actually knows what's going on. Because you've declared everything to be a lie. And some things wouldn't be a lie. Isn't that sneaky? The rest of the people on this world are declaring things to be true. And as a result, they know nothing. Okay? But they think they do. Any other comments about things that were observed this week?
I just have a question about what the DVUs are.
Oh, I'll talk about it, sure.
Okay.
That's why I wrote it up there, so I didn't have to do it while we did this. Anybody else doing experimenting this week? Have something to report? You didn't do nothing? I don't know what that means. Did nothing. Ah. Okay. All right. It stands for 4 dual basic urges. I'm too lazy to write that. 4 dual basic urges. What I would like to look at tonight then is we talked about the fact that some people eventually make a sort of 7th decision. And I said last week that if we put words on it, because I notice most people have lots of different words for this decision, that we might say that it's I want to be realized or real or actualized or develop my potential or whatever, something along those lines. If I personally were to put words on it, what I would say is I want to live. That what I'm calling living, after a certain period of time, I realize is not living. I come to some little understanding of this. This can't be what life is about. There's got to be something else going on here than what I'm doing. And I want to be alive. But I think most people probably have trouble articulating it that way. That sounds too odd to them. The idea of thinking that what I'm doing now is not living is maybe a little bit much. So most people probably get it as something along the lines of I want to be realized or actualized or something else in my life or whatever, okay? Did any of you, as you were looking at the self this week, see that decision in action? Notice times when the seventh decision popped up. Did you see that at all?
I didn't do any actual experimenting this week.
I see. That's why we're so quiet. Nobody did nothing. Okay. Well, go on, pretend like we're all working. See what happens. See, the difficulty is I'm going to talk about a lot of stuff that's just going to be theoretical at this point, because I was hoping that some would actually see the seventh decision in action, and then what was said this week would actually mean something and a person could use it. But unfortunately now it's going to be all theoretical. Okay. But if I see that decision in action, I notice that there are little moments in the life when I'm just not okay with what is going on. I have this tremendous inner desire for something, and I'm not really sure what it is. And that seventh decision sort of casts doubt on everything else that is going on, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That in those moments when I actually experience that, I look at everything else and say, I'm not sure about this. Mm-hmm. It makes sense, except when that seventh decision comes up. When that seventh decision is not there, when it's not being suggested to the I, then everything else makes sense. But when that suggestion comes up, it makes every other suggestion seem strange. It isn't necessarily seen as an illusion, it's just questioned. I wonder if this is true. You see how that works? Well, if you understand that, and that decision has been made, and if it hasn't, make it real quick, or you're in deep trouble, because without this decision, you cannot do anything about what we've described up here. You will just get to live in this picture for the rest of your life. And if you don't have that seventh decision, I personally recommend you get out of here as fast as you can, because your life is going to be hell. See? It's bad enough living that way and not knowing it. If somebody comes along and tells you what you're doing so you can't not see it anymore, it will just be a hell. So if the seventh decision is not there, I'd suggest you get it right quick, okay? Make a real strong decision with considerable feeling that you want to live, or to be real, or whatever words you care to put on it, okay? I personally like these words. These words work real good for me. But I don't know if they do for anyone, and you have to have something on that decision that works for you. So you may or may not be able to use these words. That's why I've offered several alternatives, okay? You use ones that make sense to you, not to this one. It's your seventh decision, not Phil's. Okay? But with that seventh decision, I can begin to do something extraordinary. And I really do mean that word, just as I tend to use words very literally, okay? I mean extraordinary. It's extremely rare on planet Earth that this happens. And that is that I can build, you see right now, we talked, I'm going to make a little digression here. We talked a little bit last week about the state that the I is in, whatever the real part of the awareness function that says I is, that truthfully, we've forgotten. We don't know what is real in us anymore. We know it's got to be there. But if someone walked up to you and said, "What are you?" I think you'd have one hell of a hard time answering the question. Isn't that right? I notice most people have a real hard time with a much more common question called, "Who are you?" Right? And they they're not even too good at that one. But I understand that because the answer to that question doesn't exist. There is no answer to who am I. There is no who. There's a what. To answer who, I have to trace the genealogy or the heredity of this body back to the first little guy who blacked on the planet Earth, and I can't do that. I've never bothered, for one thing, but I'm not sure I could anyway, to really get an understanding of what is going on here. I'd have to totally understand this little genetic structure, which I don't. And I would have to describe every little bit of the personality, wouldn't I? Because that's the who. And most of us, I've noticed, are not very good at describing their own personality. I occasionally call up those little bulletin boards, where people try to meet each other and they give little descriptions of themselves, right? And they're the funniest things. I occasionally read them just because I think they're hilarious, watching people trying to describe themselves. They just flutter around. Some people don't even bother. They just say, I can't answer this question. I don't know who I am. It just says, it's real simple. It just says, describe your personality. That's a really simple thing to say, isn't it? Describe your personality. And it's just like people, they even will sometimes contradict themselves in the description and not even notice. Now others, of course, mention that there are contradictions, but some just contradict themselves and don't even seem to notice that it's just the most hilarious thing. If you ever want a couple hours of amusement, you try it sometime. You come here and I'll let you use the computer. And you call some. Just see how bad people are at answering the question, who am I? There is no answer to that question, okay? The personality is a bit too complex for us to even see in our normal living. Now, of course, that's what you're being asked to do here, but we're simplifying it a bit to make that possible. But imagine if we went around for a couple hours asking everybody we met, what are you? What kind of answers do you think you'd get? A few people would say I'm a human being.
Right, so hard to ask.
What does that mean? I don't know what a human being is. I mean, that just, as I call it, begs the question, right? It shoves it off a little bit further. And then you say, well, what is a human being? I don't know. Now, I've been reading for years and I have yet to see an answer to that question. People have been struggling for hundreds of years to answer that question, haven't they? Just as in all the reading that I've ever done, I have never found an answer to the question, what is life? No one knows. We at least admit it. And stick a little X there and say, I don't know either. I'm going to learn a little bit about it before I leave here, but I don't know that I'll ever be able to answer that question. What is life? Any more than anyone else has. I think I've maybe got a slightly better, more complete description than most, but I would never, in the wildest dreams, claim that it is life. It's part of the answer, okay? Maybe it's a little more than most have. But it's still part. Which means I don't have an answer, isn't that right? If you have part of the answer to a question, then you don't have the answer. Isn't that right? So somewhere there, in the awareness, there is something that is real, that one could ask what is it, and actually come up with an answer. That one I can answer, by the way. I can say, what am I? And I can answer that. Just don't ask me what life is. Because I'll go on and on and on and on, and you still won't know it any more than I do. Okay? And that real part has been put through its method of living into a deep, deep, deep hypnotic trance, which is why we cannot answer that question. That's the explanation for that fact, okay? It is living in such a deep hypnotic trance that you have never seen a trance that deep. What we see that people call hypnotic trances when they do it on stage or in doctors' offices or something is a pale, pale comparison to the depth of this trance. And it's the only reason that you can ever hypnotize anyone, by the way. The only reason that you can hypnotize a person is because they're already hypnotized. There is absolutely no way that you can put someone else into a hypnotic state. Did you know that? It cannot be done. The only one who can ever put me into a hypnotic state is me. And if you'd like to know how to never get hypnotized, by the way, from the outside world, I can tell you. It's very simple. Anyone care? Shall I just move on?
Sure, yeah.
Well, it's real simple. If anybody ever tries to hypnotize you, just sit there and get very interested in what they're doing. They will not be able to hypnotize you. And they'll tell you that you're resisting them. And if they ask what you're doing, you'll just say, well, I was just interested in what you're doing. Well, that's resisting me. You can't put someone into a hypnotic trance if they're interested. Okay? It's impossible. But at any rate,
Scary.
what's that?
Scary.
What?
Just got one of those non-eye thoughts, you know.
Which was? Care to share the rest of it?
Thinking about all the times I've been disinterested.
Well, yeah, then
And
you're a
people,
good candidate for hypnosis. When you're not at all interested, you'll probably be in a hypnotic trance very quickly. Okay?
I think I've lived in it.
But at any rate, the only reason that can be done from the outside is because it's already true on the inside. And that trance is so deep that the I in there completely believes that it is every thought that runs through the mind. See? Now that's a deep trance, isn't it? Where I actually mistake myself for something else. We call that state being identified with. I am completely identified with some other thing, and I say that I am that thing. So if I'm identified with my car and you go up and hit my car, I'm going to beat the crap out of you because you hit me. You didn't hit my car. You hit me. See? That's called being identified with something that is not me. Each of these not I's does exactly that to the real I. It uses the word I, which is the most powerful suggestion there is, isn't it? It doesn't say, you ought to think such and such. It says, I. And the real I, as opposed to the not I, just buys that suggestion, this is me, and passes it on to X as though it were true. All right? Except it's not. It's just a suggestion. And that's what we were talking a little bit about last week. That's why waking up out of this state that everyone is in is so incredibly difficult. Because we are in a deep hypnotic trance. We need an anti-hypnotist from the outside. Okay? We need somebody who walks around saying, I will not in any way, shape, or form condone your state of hypnosis. In fact, I will do everything I can to make it as uncomfortable for you to be in a state of hypnosis as I possibly can. Okay? So there are a few anti-hypnotists here on planet Earth who walk around working real hard to de-hypnotize everyone. Or at least tell them how to do it for themselves. Okay. You'll never get it from inside. The suggestion is too strong. Whatever that you believe is true. So we need some information from outside that says, here's what you're believing. Now how do I start to check that out in this state? That stuff that comes from outside is just another suggestion as far as this eye is concerned. It's already in a hypnotic state. It's sitting there just taking it as one more suggestion. Isn't that right? It usually goes in via our dear friend, the authority person, the one that picks stuff up and turns it into a belief and quotes it as coming from an authority. So everybody works real hard to turn the anti-hypnotist into authority. Because that way I don't have to wake up out of the trance. I can just take this stuff and do what I always do with it, which is believe it or disbelieve it, and quote it at the eye as a suggestion, not as something to actually use. And it just describes an improper environment, because I guarantee you that this series of decisions will corrupt the information. It will not get stored in the mind the way it was given. It will get stored the way I already believe everything. So anyone who plays the role of anti-hypnotist says, prove me wrong. Don't accept anything that I say. Your job is to prove me wrong. That way we can kind of get around this little guy, huh? Because he wants to believe or disbelieve everything. The minute you start saying, I'm not going to believe it or disbelieve it, I'm going to go try and prove it wrong myself, then you kind of take away some of the power of decision 4 that says, if I just believed and did as my authorities tell me, I would be in a wonderful state called non-disturbed. Okay. And the other one that, of course, really loves these ideas is decision 5, that says that if I were just a little bit better, if I could just find a method for making me better, then I would be in a lovely state for the rest of my life. So 5 also brings this information in and stores it as part of a method of self-improvement. Except the anti-hypnotist says, your job is not to add anything to yourself, but to throw everything away. And try and find this again. So it got corrupted again, didn't it? The self-improver will turn it into some behavior to add on that says, if only I acted like this, then I would be non-disturbed. But the person who gives out the information says what this information is for is to identify that which is to be cast out. It's not to add anything on. This is not a how-to. This is not a course of improvement. It's not designed to help you. It's designed to show you what has been already added on that you might want to get rid of. See? And then maybe we could go back to that other picture we drew before we kind of messed it up with all this stuff. And just live that way. See? With maybe some new abilities from having dealt with the incredible hard work of having to go through this whole show. In other words, somebody who goes through the whole show of doing that becomes an entirely different kind of person. So when all this is cast out and they're back the way they were when they got here, they find out they're not the same person. They're not back the way they were when they got here. The mind is just empty again. Okay. But they're not the same person that had that original empty mind when you first get here. Real different. So one of the things that we want to do, because the eye is in such a sorry state, it can do almost nothing except listen to suggestion that tells it it ought to complain and stick up for its rights and please others and quote authorities and try to be different and blame everybody else when I fail. So, is we can use the 7th decision to get the awareness to do a real weird thing. And that is look at every suggestion that comes from the self. So the 7th decision allows us to create a new, not I. You already have so many, what's one more? Okay. And that I's job is is to be what we call the observing eye. It is not the real eye. It's a spy. Okay? Because everything but this little part of the awareness, which talks directly to the chooser, to the real eye, this little bit called the chooser that talks directly to the real eye, this is the only part of the awareness that we are now aware of. Everything else that happens in our mind is invisible to us. And that's a very small little fragment of the awareness. So most of the mind is invisible to me. I don't even know what's going on down there. It's called unconscious. Isn't that right? And this little thing that we call the conscious mind, but around here in technical terms we call the chooser, is busy listening to these so-called unconscious things, which is really a bunch of old decisions or not eyes that say, do these 6 things in about 6 billion different ways. A little bit of it runs across the so-called conscious mind, which is the chooser, that says, I should please them, and then they'd stop bugging me. But if I please them, then I won't be happy, so I'd rather complain. But if I complain, then they won't like me, so let's see, maybe there's an authority stored somewhere that I can quote at them to get them to act different, But if I do that, see, and that's what goes through our heads. It's called trying to make a choice. And we don't see the action of all this other stuff that's going on. So it's very hard for us to disidentify with it because it just comes as a continuous stream of thought from the chooser, doesn't it? And we all think that's me thinking. It's called being in a hypnotic trance. We don't realize that that's just a function of the body. It has nothing to do with me. It's a little computer, Everybody is born with a little computer. And I really mean this because we designed computers based on our understanding of how thinking occurs. So computers are just like a very poor brain. Okay, well, they're not very good. The brain is much better. They're a bad replica. Because, when we went to make a computer, we didn't know what a computer ought to be, so we just sort of took what we did understand of the brain's function and reproduced it as best we could in electronics. So these programmers who like to go around saying, computers are really stupid, guess what they're telling you about you? It's true. Because our brains work exactly the way the computers do, except that they're in a whole lot more trouble than most computers are, thank God. Most computers have somebody kind of watches them to make sure they don't go really, wacko. But we're just the same way. We have these 6 little programs, which have been rewritten about 7 or 8 or 9 or 10,000 billion times. Okay? And once these programs are written, they just run automatically for the rest of the life. Now, most of the programmers in the world added this nice feature to their programs. They notice when it's time to stop. Okay? There are very few programs that are designed to run forever. There are a few, but very, very few. Most of them kind of run for a little while, and then they notice that there's nothing left to do, so they just stop. And that gives the computer time to do something else. We didn't do that when we programmed our computer. We just let all these things run constantly, over and over and over again, forever. And then we wonder why we just have no energy in our life. Almost all the energy that goes in the body goes to keep this silly computer running a bunch of programs endlessly. See? So we send a little spy down there because we don't know how to pay attention to this yet. One day we'll be able to do that for ourselves. But in the meantime, we make something just like all these guys that live down there, another little program, so to speak, okay, whose job it is to spy on all the rest of them. And we say, now look, don't take anything seriously. Don't like let him con you into believing you're one of them, okay? Did you know that there's an operating system around, by the way, that calls these programs demons? Did you know that? There's an operating system around that does have certain programs that are written to run forever and never stop. And you know what they're called? Demons. Okay. So we'll create our own little demon. And this guy's job is to pretend to be a demon, but to actually be a spy and report back to us everything that all the rest of the things in the brain are doing, okay? That we call not eyes. Yes, ma'am?
That I have noticed without setting out to notice it. Like I didn't set out to do any work this week, but I did. It simply becomes a habit of thought.
That's right.
You're in the process of, you're basically headed down that road behind a whole gaggle of knot eyes, and
That's right.
and something says, "Are you sure?"
That's right. That little observer, once it's created, it does its
Very
job whether you pay
mistrustful.
attention to it or not.
Yeah, and it
Exactly
was
right.
looking over my shoulder several times this week.
It's just like any other knot. Bit of work to get this thing started. In other words, you have to do it on purpose for a little short period of time until it becomes an unconscious habit. So you spend a short period of time working as hard as you can to observe what's going on, and then after a while this little program just runs all the time. Just like all the rest of them do. This little knot eye that we call the observer eye, observing eye, okay? The special one, the observing eye. You practice it for a little while, just like you practice complaining for a couple of years, isn't that right? You worked real hard at that. For a period of time, boy, anything that came up, you just let out a yowl, isn't that right? Because you didn't have words yet, so you just started screaming. And you worked real hard at that. Bet you're sorry now, but at the time it seemed like the reasonable thing to do, and was. Okay, and you worked real hard sticking up for your rights for a while, and you worked real hard blaming for a while. That's called adolescence. You worked real hard at that for a while. And you worked real hard at all these things, you see. And then after a while, they just became little automatic things that just automatically suggest do this and you'll get non-disturbance. So you practice this for a little while, and then it just starts being like any other knot eye, and it just constantly tells you what all the rest of the knot eyes are doing. So you start to get a way to be aware of what's going on in what's called the unconscious mind, you see. By starting out by looking at the thoughts that run through the chooser and asking which of these 6 decisions is that thought based on. Okay? So the eye reports directly to, or the observing eye reports directly to the eye. It doesn't go through the chooser. You're really lucky if you do this well. It just reports right directly to the eye. So no matter what the chooser's doing, the observer is always given a little running commentary that says, well, that thought came from number 2, and that thought came from number 6, and that thought came from number 4. And behind all those thoughts, I hate to tell you this, but 3 and 5 are having a field day. Boy, are they getting you ready for something. They're going to come up with the most interesting suggestion you ever heard tomorrow. Because they watch, the observing eye watches them where they actually are happening, not just in the chooser. So they'll even tell you about little things they're working on for later. Okay? You get the idea of this?
Yeah.
Are there any questions or comments? Because I think it's time to take another short break before I go on to say what we're going to do with the information the spy reports to us. Not enough to have a spy. You've got to do something with that information, right?
Yeah, I have a comment. I just can't hold it back.
Yeah.
For years, I've been trying to see the real operative suggestion. I hardly ever do. Sometimes I see the superficial ones. I hardly ever see the one that's underneath all of them. The question is, if the observing eye reports directly to the real eye, therefore doesn't go through the chooser.
Well, sometimes it does, but usually not.
All right, but this seems to me a much more direct way of maybe being able to observe that.
Yeah, but then we get into, well, how are you going to do that? See, I'm talking about it this way, but if you start saying, well, how am I going to set that up? Now, we're talking about a very complex thing called the human nervous system, okay? You don't know how to program the human nervous system, okay? So I'm just describing the way it works. I'm not saying this is a how. This is the what. How this happens, don't ask me, because I don't know. Okay?
Okay.
If you want it to happen, it's the simplest thing in the world. You just want it to happen. And the next does it that way,
Okay.
instead of some other way.
Yeah.
Now maybe it's just that's the way it was when Phil heard about this idea of setting up an observing eye. Phil sort of got this idea a little bit and said, you know, I want it to talk to me directly. I really don't want it going through the chooser where it'll get all messed up. Maybe that's just something that I did. I don't know. Maybe everybody doesn't do that and this experience is different. I don't know. I doubt it. X is pretty smart. Okay. But I do know that at the time that was a consideration that was not even put into words. It's like, well, you know, I would kind of like that observer to talk to me and not become a bunch of thoughts. That's a real drag. So maybe just by describing it this way, a few other people will get that desire and accept it that way for me. Okay? Yes, ma'am.
I can't imagine once you see whatever it is they're suggesting, that you would want to choose. You know, I mean, the chooser is just choosing between a whole bunch of really bad possibilities.
I can, because I've lived it so many times.
Seeing it clearly and still just choosing A or B.
Well, I don't know what seeing it clear. I mean, you know, that gets kind of absolute, but I know that there are many times that the observing eye has said, this is a suggestion, Mr. Blecker.
Oh, and then you just kind of...
And I said, but I can't see the illusion of it. Thank you for telling me. Unfortunately, I still don't see it as an illusion. So there, off I go doing it while the observer says, and now they're saying this, and now they're saying this, and I'm going, well, thank you very much. I really appreciate you telling me this. At least I won't get really upset when I adapt tomorrow. Any other questions or comments? Okay, let's take maybe a 10-minute break. So give the mind a chance to rest. So how are you? Long time no see, stranger.
I know.
I've got somebody named Bruce Macy. Does that name
Who's Macy?
Okay, any questions or comments? Come up. Observations? Was that a yes?
Is there any possibility that there could be more than, or you could add on, fabricate another one of the, I guess, not eyes? Yeah, maybe a different type of culprit.
Other than these 7 decisions?
Yeah, basically.
Like what?
Um,
I don't like dealing with theory. I like dealing with observations. Okay? Give me an example of something that isn't that.
maybe the intimidator.
What's that?
Intimidator, maybe.
What do you call number 2?
Okay.
How would you like to be scab labor for some people who are sticking up for their rights for a job? think they'd be a little intimidating if you did that? Sounds like number 2 to me.
Yeah, number 2.
Let's, again, run the assumption that this is a complete picture, and if it turns out not to be, then you'll find out. That's called disproving it, but I don't disprove it by imagining, I disprove it by actually observing, okay? By actually looking at things and saying, this just doesn't fit. But I got to do that over a period of time. I can't just say, I don't see where this fits. You understand?
Yes. I got the understanding when you explained that.
Yeah. I just thought I'd go into theory for a second. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Now this observer needs a little bit of training when it's set up. In other words, I set it up in a very simple way, the same way I set up every other not I in self. I make a decision with feeling that this is what I want. I want to observe self. Simplest thing in the world, isn't it? Just as I once made a decision with feeling that it is important that I get my way now, and the way to get it is to complain. And it was a decision made with feeling. It eventually became a whole group of personalities that complain about many, many different things so that I'll get my way. So all I have to do, it's not magic or anything, it's just simple. You just say to X, I want to know what's going on in self. And you make that decision with a little feeling, and the next thing you know, you've got a little observing eye going on. And you act on that a few times, just as you acted on complaining a few times, by actually observing. And that reports to X that that's what I want, and X does that. Understand? So I don't need to know how this is done, any more than I need to know how anything else is done in the body. I just want it to happen, and then act as if I want it to happen. That way I know the feeling's there. Because I can't act on something unless I get a feeling for it. It's just the way it works. So if I actually do it a little bit, then I know that there's some feeling going on along with it. And I make the decision, this is what I want. Once it's there, it takes a little training to get it to do the job the way that you want it to. Okay? And again, that means that you do it to the best of your ability the way you want it done. So the recommendation is that every time you act on doing that observing, you make an effort to see which of the 6 decisions you're looking at, and maybe occasionally the 7th. That sort of tells X that that's what you want the observing eye to do, is tell you which not eye you're listening to. If you don't do that, then you get the situation Paul described, because that was just too much work in the beginning. So it wasn't trained properly. And it's very hard to train it after it's been set up, isn't it, Paula?
Yeah.
Very hard. It can be done, but it takes tremendous attention. Okay?
Okay.
So it's much easier to do it right from the get-go. Okay? Have a little bit of trust that perhaps the one who is describing the way of doing things actually might know a little bit about what they're doing, and just kind of try it out that way and see what happens. Worst that happens is they're wrong, and you throw the whole thing out and go on about your business. Okay? Now, the next thing that can be done here is that everything that the observing eye reports about what's going on in the self can then be held up to the light of the 7th decision. In other words, I say, is this what I want? will complaining allow me to become a realized being? Or does a fully alive being complain? Is that what they do? Do they look at everything and say, God, this sucks? And I'll tell everybody I can about how terrible my life is. Is that what a fully alive being does? Or do they simply see it as something to do? Whatever it is that the self is complaining about, as a fully alive being, just look at that and say, oh, there's something to do. So, is that what a real being does, is complains about their lot in life? Is that your definition of real? You understand? So everything is held up to that seventh decision and said, is this in accord with what I want? So the seventh decision gives us an aim. I already have a purpose of living. And we know that that purpose of living will say to every suggestion that comes from the self, good. Because all of these suggestions were designed to get this purpose of living. So this does us absolutely no good to see anything as a suggestion, does it? Doesn't work. So the seventh decision creates a new aim for the life, doesn't it? Whatever that decision is, however you formulate it, it says that is the aim for the life. It is not a purpose. I already have a purpose, and you cannot have two purposes at the same time. And I don't know how to, at this point, change the purpose of my life, even though I heard that can be done. Isn't that right, Mr. Mike? Mr. Mike decided that he didn't want to share this, but I'm such a mean son of a bitch, I'm going to do it anyway, because it's just too useful to ignore. And he called up and said, I really hate watching myself. It's really unpleasant. And of course, Phil's sitting there saying, wow, I've never heard a complaint before. Sure sounds like number one to me. And Mr. Mike said, well, I see that it is all, which I sincerely doubt that he actually saw, but that's the way the not-eyes talk. They see everything. Everything is black and white and absolutes to them, isn't that right? I see it is all about non-disturbance, because that's the way they talk. I'm not making fun of Mike, I'm making fun of the not-eyes, I'll admit that. I think they're very amusing. They see everything there is to see, in about 24 hours, of course. So I see it's all about non-disturbance, so what I will do is make a new purpose for my life. And I said, go do that. And he just sort of ignored that. But I kind of said, no, let's do that. Isn't that right? So he said, after being asked, well, here's something that I would like to have as a purpose for living besides being non-disturbed. And I said, good, go do it for an hour. And we must be practical here, We won't call it a new purpose for the life. We'll just see if I can do it for 60 minutes. If it was going to be a purpose for the rest of my life, I should be able to do it for 60 minutes, don't you think? So we talked about a circumstance where it could be done for 60 minutes, and we went off and did it. And how many of those 60 minutes did you spend doing that purpose, Mike?
I wouldn't really know.
What do you mean you wouldn't know?
I wouldn't really know.
What do you mean you wouldn't know? We could do this forever. Who was there? I wasn't there. I can't answer the question. How many minutes?
Maybe 20?
Liar.
But I don't know.
What?
Not seeing
I don't know. Doesn't mean you make something up. Why don't you know?
Because I'm assuming that I'm not going to be able to see all of the not eyes as they happen.
Fiddle fart. You just don't want to say. Because that too would be disturbing to recognize what actually happened. So we're right back in complaining. Okay? I'll hazard a guess. I'd say about 30 seconds. Okay? That's what I'll say. You know why? Because if I don't know whether I did it or not, then did I do it? Or am I just bullshitting myself? I don't know. If somebody said to me yesterday, how much time did you spend playing the piano? I could tell them, Mike. Okay? You see what I'm saying? If somebody said to me, how much time yesterday did you spend typing at the computer, I could give an estimate. And I gotta admit, I don't pay that much attention to time. But I could give an estimate, okay? If you ask me how much time I spent today, I can truly give you an estimate. All right? Because it's still fresh in the memory, all right? Yesterday, I could tell you, too. See? Because I did it. So somebody says, I don't know. I know what they're really saying. I didn't do it. Because if you'd done it, you'd know how much time you spent.
I'd say about 20 minutes.
Okay. I don't believe you for 1 second.
Or 30 seconds.
And I think that you're doing yourself a real disservice by saying that. But you know what? It's none of my business, and that's fine. At any rate, if I take a 60-minute period of time and I do something for 20 minutes, it ain't going to be a purpose for living, because a purpose for living is done every single moment. It motivates everything that you do. There is never a moment when you are not struggling to be non-disturbed. Okay? You go to the bathroom because it disturbs you not to. You don't do it because it's a neat idea. Okay? You eat because it disturbs you not to. Or because it'll give you some pleasure. Unfortunately, we eat for that reason a lot of the time. Body ain't hungry, but we're going to eat anyway because it feels good. I go to work because it would disturb me more not to. It disturbs me to go to work, but it would disturb me a whole lot more not to. See? There's nothing that I do that isn't motivated by whatever the purpose that I have. So even if it was a third of that hour, so what does that mean? A third of your life you're going to act, and the rest you're going to sit there going, I can't do nothing because I don't have a purpose now. You see? Without a purpose, you can't do anything. And so the point of this is that no matter how much we would like to believe that in our current state of existence we could make a new purpose for the life, we can't do it. It's a lie to even say that. And each can do that. I'm talking about this. You can go try it. If you don't believe me, I'm not saying believe me. Check it out. Go spend an hour making some new purpose for your life and see how much of that hour you spend actually doing it. Okay? If you didn't spend the full 60 minutes doing it, it wasn't a purpose. It's just that simple. It was something to do that you thought would give you non-disturbance, but you didn't believe it for the full 60 minutes, so you couldn't even do that. Because for 40 of those 60 minutes, you didn't believe that that would give you non-disturbance. So it wasn't your purpose, was it? Even for 20 minutes. So I'll accept, at least in words, that you actually did it for 20 minutes. Although knowing what you actually chose to do, I really doubt that. Okay? If I didn't know what you really... and I'm not going to share it, it's none of my business to do that, but if I didn't know what he said he was going to do for an hour, I might believe he did it for 20 minutes, but I don't even believe that in this particular case, all right? Humans just can't do that. Not the way we are. But even so, for 40 of those minutes, it wasn't a purpose. And I'm telling you, if that's the case, then for 20 of those minutes it wasn't either. It's just for 20 minutes you conned yourself into believing that you'd be non-disturbed if you did that other thing. So your purpose was still to be non-disturbed, wasn't it, Mike? You see that? But for 20 of those minutes that you spent in that hour, you conned yourself into believing that if I did this thing, then I would be non-disturbed. And for 40 of those minutes, you couldn't buy that story. So the purpose was not changed, even for 20 minutes. Okay? So we won't worry about new purposes yet. One of these days we will, but not quite yet. For now, we'll just set up an aim. Now, an aim simply says this is a place that I'm going to travel. So a direction for the life. I don't know where it's going to end up. If I did, then we wouldn't call it an aim. We'd call it a goal. Isn't that right? If I knew where I would end up by traveling in this direction, then I would call it a goal, because I got a picture in my mind of where I'm going, and that's my goal, and I'm going to go there. This is an aim because I have no idea where I'm going to end up. Somebody told me it'd be pretty interesting, but I don't know if they're telling the truth or not. It's just that simple. So I was just going to say, well, I'll travel that way for a while and see if I like it or not. So that's what that seventh decision does, is it sets up a new aim for the life, which we might call a new good or a new value. Isn't that right? Previously, the only value was put on always having pleasure and comfort, attention, approval, a feeling of importance. And never having anything that I considered to be painful or being ignored or rejected when I didn't want to be, or being disapproved of or feeling insignificant or inferior. That's the only value that this life has. It's the only value that the awareness can see in living, is to gain these and to escape these. That is the value that I see now. Anything that will promote gaining one of these pleasures, I say, all right, that's good. Anything that will promote escaping these pains, I say, all right. Anything that says you can't have pain, you can't have pleasure, or you're going to get some pain, I say, right, Mike?
Yeah.
That's the only value that I can see, because that's my purpose of living, to be non-disturbed. But we're going to set up a new aim. That says, even though I still want to be non-disturbed, I'm willing to be a little disturbed because there's something else that I want. I've seen a new value. Just as some people can say that if I had big muscles, everyone would just fall in love with me everywhere I went, and they'd give me so much attention and approval. It would just be the most wonderful thing that ever was. So they're willing to put up with a little pain for the promise of a lovely future reward. Isn't that right? Because non-disturbance will work that way. We'll take a little bit of pain now if there's a promise of a greater pleasure later. Isn't that right? That we can buy. So we can do this. Okay? We can set up a new aim that says I can experience a little bit of pain. Now say, I can't do that because I get so damn much attention and approval without having muscles that it's just not worth it to me. So I've never been interested in doing that. It just looks like too much work. It looks hard and painful. And I can't con myself into believing that I'll get something better if I go through that pain. So I just cannot do that. Years ago, I joined a health club and promised myself I'd work out every day. I wanted to just pay a bunch of money. I didn't win. Because every morning I'd wake up and think, well, you better go do something. And I said, tomorrow. I'll leave it that once. That was enough stupidity for one life. Okay. So I can make a new aim. Perhaps I can say I want to be serene. It's another aim that I could make at this point. That's a fancy word for peace of mind, isn't that right? There are lots of ways that the seventh decision can be made. You pick one that works for you, that you could say is an aim for this life, something that I could value enough that when things get a little tough, I can remind self, I can remind me of what it is that I want out of life. Because the problem with this little thing called non-disturbance is that it's all about getting and escaping. So I have lots of things that I want to get, and lots of things I don't want to get. But if you ask somebody, what do you want to do with your life, they kind of look at you like, huh? You mean you can do something with it? Well, I guess what I want to do then is get lots of neat things and escape all the bad things. That's what I want to do. You see, we're not very good at that question. What do you want to do? All of our wants are about gaining and escaping things. You see, well, I want to have a lot of money. But I don't want to work hard because that's painful. I don't want it to be tied down because that's unpleasant. I want my freedom. See? So that person ain't going to get much money, are they? They want the money, but... And on it goes. Because all of our wants are about gaining and escaping things. We don't think of want in terms of doing very often. What do you want to do? Now this is an aim that might be about doing. It'll get us to the place where we see life as about doing rather than getting and escaping. Okay? Because it may sound to you as though serenity is a thing that you have, but that's because you've never tried it. Anyone who has ever tried it knows it's something you do. It's not something that you get. Okay? You don't go to the local store and say, I'd like a couple pounds of serenity, that'll keep me going for today. You know? It don't work that way. You do it. Okay? Living is not something you get, it's something you do. Being real is not something you get, that's obvious, or you have it. It's something that you do. So these aims that we're putting out, when seen for what they are actually about doing rather than getting and escaping. So it's a new value, a new good that's being seen for the life. And every suggestion that comes up is seen in the light of that aim. And it gives me a little space to question. Do I really want to do what the suggestion says? It's beginning to de-hypnotize me a bit. Before, the suggestion just came up and blam, that was what I told X and off I went. Now, I see it as suggestion, and eventually I can start to look at each suggestion in the light of this seventh decision and say, well, that takes me closer to this new good that I've seen for living. It gives you a little room to question what the self is telling you, you see. And that's where we want to be. That's the beginning of the way out of this. Okay? Any questions or comments about this? And I understand that this isn't changing the experiment that we're working on in any way, shape, or form, except to maybe consider the seventh decision a little bit and say, how have I made that? And maybe make it clear to me. Okay, but other than that, it's still the same experiment. We're just maybe seeing it in a technical way so we can work on it a little bit more clearly and quicker. When I understand something really well, I can do it better. So I know what it's doing. I can report more clearly to X what's going on, and so X will do it a little bit easier because it's getting the description, you see. This is not how, even though I know it sounds like it. It's just a good what, so that as you're doing all of this, you can more clearly understand what you're doing. You can describe it better to X and say, this is what's going on, and X will act on it a little bit more efficiently because it's getting a good description. So, but please don't treat it as a how. You don't know how to create an observing eye. All you can do is want one created, and X will do it. I did start to say any questions or comments and interrupted myself. Are there any questions or comments?
Yeah, what exactly is the experiment specifically?
I've repeated it for weeks now. There's a sheet of paper that says for each of the 6 decisions, what is the suggestion? What is the DBU that it's involved with? What is the environment that it described to X? Did it work? Did it get you the DBU or did it get you to escape it? It's the same one we've been working on theoretically for several weeks now. Okay. Just giving you a little better technical description of what we're doing here. Okay?
So if figuring out what you want is not trying to gain something, but trying to do something, then do you only put value on the suggestions that you see that you're trying to escape?
I can't tell you in theory. Number one, you can't figure out what you want because it's, again, completely covered up by illusions that come from the self. So you can't figure it out. It's the same thing we talked about earlier of looking for truth or reality when all I have to see by is illusion, okay? So for right now, I'm sort of stuck having to say, I don't know what I want. Now, if I can kind of assume that everything that comes up is not what I want, then I may discover that one of those things I really want. Same deal, okay? We're going to work at it in a real weird, backward-seeming way to the mind, which thinks it can go at everything directly and doesn't see that it's so full of illusions that it can't do that. I don't know if I understood the question real well. I hope
It touched on what I was...
Okay, good. Any other questions or comments?
Well, so you pointed out that we need to make a decision on number 7. And this is...
Although I do suspect you made it already or you wouldn't be here.
Yeah.
A few people get here without it and they usually leave real quick.
But I still... I'm not going to find it.
Okay.
Because...
How have you thought about it?
Well...
I mean, what has been the
Okay, so
the kind of discomfort that got you to question things, okay? What has that been? What have you thought about?
I have wanted to live.
Okay. So you've seen to some degree or another that the way you're living is not living at all. It's just kind of a counterfeit. All right. Then what's wrong with just saying that? I want to live. And look at every suggestion that comes up and say, is this living? So to me they're all the same thing.
Okay.
Part of living is being in a place of serenity, at least.
So as I go through life and things are there, and I have to ask, is this what I want? Is this what will give to me?
Well, no, you don't have to. I'm not going to run around behind you with a whip and
I've got the will.
every time you know it.
This is what I do to myself. Everything I come into contact with. Do I want this? Yes, yes.
This is not the same. We're now doing it in light of some very technical information. What you're talking about is number 5, torturing the hell out of you, because you're still not good enough yet. And it's your job to start seeing that suggestion as number 5, torturing the hell out of you, because you're not good enough yet, okay? Not to go into it, because it sounds like what we're talking about. I did mention that there are 2 of these decisions that pick up on this information real fast and corrupt it and make it useless. Okay? 4, who quotes it as something coming from authority, even though the one that they're quoting said, don't treat me as an authority and disprove what I have to say. And 5, that treats it as a means to improve self. So it's your job to start seeing that as 5. Okay? That's all it is. And not by that suggestion either. It hasn't gotten you any closer to living yet. I'm a lot older than you are. And it didn't get me any closer after a lot more years than you've even tried it. It doesn't work. I've met people who are 90 years old who are still trying to improve themselves. And they're miserable. It doesn't work. Okay. Any other questions or comments? This may be one of the last times that I discuss this at any length as we're together. Perhaps I wouldn't count on it. So if you do have any questions or comments, unless you bring it up next week when I say, what did you do? I'm going to do that anymore. It's all clear as mud. Okay.
An observation. In order to want to be serene, I think that there has to be
There's a prerequisite to wanting something?
Well, there has to be some concept of what serene is.
Why?
I don't know.
So you're telling me that when you were a child, and you knew nothing about food, that in order to want hunger to be gratified, you had to first know what food was. It never occurred to you to complain that you had a sensation of hunger until you found out that there was food. In which case, one has to wonder why you ate the first time. When that little nipple was shoved in your mouth, why didn't you suck on it? Unless there was some overwhelming urge to do some bizarre thing. It sounds funny, but think about when you take somebody and you transfer them to sucking on a nipple to having a little thing poked in their mouth called a spoon. What do kids do? Yeah, I don't want that. It takes them a while to figure out you're putting food in their mouth, doesn't it? But that doesn't mean that they don't know about hunger. It means they don't know about that particular method of getting it, and they got to get some experience with it to say, spoons flying at my face means food. But anybody who's had a young kid around knows that when you first start giving them a spoon instead of a nipple, they are not happy. And they kind of put up a bit of a fuss. It takes them a while to kind of get that that spoon's got food in it, okay? You got to do some little tricks to kind of like, you know, put it on their lips and get them to taste it and stuff, you know, before they say, okay, you can stick that damn thing in my mouth. Okay? But long before you knew there was food, because when you first got here, you had no concept of food. You'd been fed through a tube. You didn't even know what hunger was, much less about food. That stuff came in from outside and made you feel warm and good again. You see, when the terrible sensation came up, said, I'm hungry. But I noticed you so probably managed to suck on that nipple when you put it in there. So that's just not true. If mankind had to know what the answer was before they ever tried anything, we'd still be sitting in a cave somewhere. But God, not everyone, is as adventuresome as some. What a put down. There are many things that I can want because, in other words, I see that what I have miserable. And I've said all along, I'm not real clear on what it is that I want. I've said it was an aim. I said it wasn't a goal. So if the only way you can do something is to have a goal, Mike, then you're deep shit out of luck. Don't work that way. That's why you were given an imagination, by the way. I know you like to use it to torment yourself with terrible pictures of what's going to happen to me tomorrow if... But it actually wasn't to be able to think about things that you might like to try, even though you haven't done them yet. But that is what we do with the imagination, isn't it? We use it to paint terrible pictures about the horrible thing that'll happen tomorrow unless I do such and such. And it's become a torture instrument. Or we use it to fantasize about lovely things so that we can miss this moment forever. This moment gets a little dull or something, so we say, let's see, I'm in the middle of the South Pacific now, and there are all these lovely naked people all around who just are waiting to do my bidding. Well, that's the kind of thing that I have. What can I say? Probably not the same as yours, but that's fine.
That in reality.